In the planning process, we want accountability for the key factors to ensure success. The place to start is with choosing the site itself. And there are 5 key factors for the site. And the first one is you want good airflow. You don't want a lot of structures or dense vegetation around it that's going to impede the airflow, because good airflow will reduce the chances for disease development that can affect the foliage and the fruit itself. So good airflow, and you want good sun exposure. You don't want you should have at least 8 hours of direct sun on your site for each day to ensure good growth. The third item is to avoid frost pockets, low-lying areas that are prone to frost in the spring. If you have to use an area like that, you really need an emergency response plan, which is basically just overhead watering until the frost has melted off and temperatures have risen above 32. The other thing on the site is you want to make sure you have good access to it. You want to be able to get to it without any obstacles so that you can maintain the site and for harvesting and just for your own enjoyment. And while you're looking at the site, you always want to be aware of any possible utility line issues, overhead lines or underground lines. You want to take all this into consideration before you ever start to plant. Now, once you've covered those areas, you want to, the next step is to look at the soil itself. The soil should have good drainage. You want to avoid low pockets that will collect water and cause waterlogged soils. Waterlogged soils will kill the roots of the plant and ultimately kill the plant itself. So you want to make sure that there's good drainage. You might have to consider mounding the dirt on the site, doing any amendments to improve the contour for good flow of water. On the opposite end of the spectrum, you've got, if you're on a slope, you want to make sure that you've got water retention and erosion control, so you can consider terracing in that type of situation. Once you've chose your site and you've looked at the soil, you also want to consider testing the soil and the water source. Testing can be done at labs, or you can talk to your extension office about it, but unless you're really familiar with your soil and your water source, there's potential there for problems. And so again, we want to account for that before we actually start planting. And on the soil, we're looking at what type of soil is it, what's the pH, what kind of nutrients are available, is it heavy clay, is it real sandy? So there's a lot to consider there. This is going to be what provides life to your trees. So you want to make sure that you know what you're dealing with. With water, the most common problem is excess salts. And if the water has too high of a salt level, that can be toxic to the plants. So again, you want to know what you're dealing with, account for all these factors. Once you've done that process with choosing the site, and you know your soil well and your water source, then you're ready to design. And the design needs to accommodate the mature size of the trees with proper spacing. You also want to consider, again, the sun exposure. You don't want to plant on the south end of the bed one of your tallest trees that's going to cast shadows on the rest of your plantings. So you want to take that into consideration and have good sun exposure. And you also want to make sure that you have thought about possible future expansion, because future expansion, when you're in the designing stage, that's already accounted for. And instead of after the fact thinking, you know, I wish I would have done this differently because I want to expand in this area. So again, you've accounted for all these factors. Now, if you've received your trees and you haven't gone through and accounted for all these key factors that we've outlined, you've got two options. If you feel like you know your land pretty well and you're comfortable with it, you can go ahead and plant it. However, if you're uncertain about making sure that all of these key factors are accommodated, then I would consider planting the trees in a pot, and then that allows you to study it and get your test run and anything that you need to do to prepare and plant the trees in the fall, because fall is a great time to plant. The site could be anything from a field to a small backyard. All of these key factors still apply. If you're in a small backyard, you're limited on where you can plant, but you still want to account for the good airflow and the sun exposure and all the points that we made. A larger field gives you more flexibility, but there could also be more issues, more changes in the land as you go through it that could affect the overall growth. So if we've accounted for all these key factors, our plants should thrive and not just survive.